We have an opening invocation and
Yes.
pledge allegiance. Diane?
Yes. Well, Dan? Father, we praise you for this meeting and your purpose for it. We know that when we gather together, you always have a divine agenda. We love you for that, Father, that even when we have done what you have asked, the results are so much greater than we could have ever imagined. Even in failed attempts, you blow us away with your faithfulness to provide what we need. Our prayer today is that your will be done through our meeting this evening. Take what we have prepared and multiply our efforts as only you can. Steer our intentions to align with your righteous will. Remind us of your faithful provision when all our efforts fail us or fall short. May all the glory go up to you when we reach the finish line and climb over the benchmarks. Father, finally, we pray for peace for this land after the election. We ask that all those that were elected in government work together for the good of those that elected them. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Okay.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, indivisible. All right.
We kind of messed that one up.
Play ball.
Yeah.
As soon as you hear one person tap off, it kind of trips everybody else.
The trustees are much better at that, I'm just saying.
All right.
I think we need a sign up there.
No.
I'll bring lyrics
Okay.
next month.
Okay, do we have any comments from the public tonight? Doesn't look like that. Okay. Do we need to act on any adjustments? Okay, thanks, Jeannie. Okay, we have the consent agenda, items 4 through 9.
Make a motion that we pass the consent agenda. that
Okay.
passes.
Okay, do I have a second? Any discussion or comments regarding the agenda? I mean, the whole agenda, including the minutes. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes. Let's move on to the regular agenda, item 10, the Estuary Woodlands Division report. Chris.
All right, so just a few items to highlight. The first is financials not in your packet. They are over here. Shelley may have passed one out prior, so if you don't have one, let me know. I'll get you one. One thing I have been pointing out is this is the first month after year-end close. So when you look at the under budget or net cash basis of 2.7 million, that is not entirely true. One of the biggest factors is under purchase and contract services is about 1.9 million or so under budget. Because GRP was not paid, and we know we do pay them. So therefore, long story short, the financials to be corrected in October is basically we didn't accrue enough and we did not pay enough bills in September as normal because of year-end close. So second, yeah, no problem. Anybody else need one?
Yes.
Second item again.
Is that normal that the September is not going to be
Today's
accurate?
For us, it is.
Just because you're busyness with the closing the books for all the year.
Right. So what they do is for the October or the August books, they hold them open until about the third week of September. And they're too busy closing, not too busy, but they're busy closing out the previous financials. And then they don't have enough time to get everything in prior to the close for September.
Yeah.
And so normally what they'll do is they'll go through and accrue what everything they think it's going to be. But this time they weren't able to fully accrue everything. So
that reporting system is all, the software is installed and it's functioning correctly.
it is functioning. There's still some bugs and some tweaks and everything. That's why you're seeing September financials, not October financials. Because you should have seen September financials last month, and this month you should have seen October
So
financials.
you're still working through some snags.
Got it. But they're getting closer. I mean, that's the good news. Not
Yeah.
3 or 4 months, right? So they're getting there. Any other questions? Next item is on page 21. You'll see that on the project list, I've made another change to that, try to make it a little bit more user friendly. The one item I've been pointing out is under location, instead of just saying what which mud it's in, I'm trying to put intersections, locations, addresses. So if you're driving by, you get a question, then you'll actually be able to relate it back and say, okay, this project is for the River Authority or whatever it may be. Another little nuance of this is if there is a project that the trustees approved and y'all approved as being using excess funds, It'll notify you under funding source. It'll say R&R, excess funds, and whatever else it may be. So if anybody wants to track the 3 projects that were approved for excess funds, you'll be able to track them in here, how they're doing versus what y'all approved.
Is the yellow highlight meaning it's being about to be closed out? It's leaving the report?
Correct. That means final invoices have been received and next month it will not be on your report.
Hey, Chris, you'd mentioned something at the trustee meeting about the lost and unaccounted for this month that
Yes.
you made a comment about. Could you repeat that comment?
You can refresh my memory. That was,
Well, you said we're like into the month, into the fiscal year by 1 month.
correct.
And that what we're seeing here, total loss of 6% seems high. We budgeted for. And you made a comment that, it rolls around and we had this month is not reflective of probably the rest of the year. So just,
Correct. And so when I set the FY 25 budget, what I did was I looked back at the previous fiscal years for the last 2, 3, 4 years. And looking at the data and the graph and the trend and everything, we are actually 3.72, 3.75, so under 4%. And so you can see the rolling 12's at 5.1%, budget's at 4%. I've added this new column for FY 25 just so y'all can see how actually we're tracking versus budget. So obviously we're 2% off, but that is only also just September of this year. It does not include October. So as you go through the winter months, usually that number drops down. When you get into the summer, sometimes it does increase a little bit. Although looking at these numbers and looking at the trends for the last few months, I'm wondering if 4% is going to be correct going in FY 26, which we start looking at here in a couple of months. Now, the good news is when I looked at the difference in 4% versus 4.5%, the revenue difference is about $100,000 out of $42 million. So it's not a huge swing one way or the other, but it does affect the rate. So just trying to dial it in and see what the best number to use is. So
There's 24, you got the AC water line condition-based assessments that have started.
yes, sir.
How's it going?
It's an odd study for me. And I'll say that in the sense of most studies that we do, like the strategic plan, there's constant updates, if you will. And so they do a report, they do something, they do a study, they do something, and then you get information, right? Almost every single month you're having information come to you. In this case, with this one here, we're doing a lot of testing, but we're not getting the data back to us just yet. And so they're taking, data from this one vendor, data from this other vendor, and they're comparing it against each other. And then ultimately we're going to get the report. But the reason I say it's odd is there's not constant ongoing information being provided to us as far as here's the conclusions, here's the recommendations, here's what we've seen from the ultrasonic testing so far, which is why we haven't really been able to report anything to y'all because we haven't received anything.
Did they give you an ETA when you can start to get some data?
So we're looking at December to January for some of the ultrasonic testing because they're going to take that ultrasonic testing data. And from that data, that's when they're going to decide on where the destructive testing needs to be. So they want to wrap all this up, put a nice little bow on it and say, based on this data here, this is where you need to go dig holes and break pipe. And so to do that, they said that would be in the first quarter of 25. So they said December to January is when they should have that data readily available.
Okay.
Did you guys have a break at Groveland's Mill and Research yesterday?
You guys, in the terms of GRP, yeah. So that was the last item I have. So you may have noticed Research Forest and Grogan's Mill. We have an ongoing excavation. They should be pulled off now at this point in time. I can't see anything. That broke yesterday about 3:30 to 4 o'clock. It is a 30-inch GRP line. It is a PVC line. It is about, after measurements today, it's about 60 foot from a break that we had in 2002 or 2022, right? So the original plan was to go in there and just fix that one area, pull it out, put a new piece in, button it up. And I think it was about 3 o'clock today when I was on site, we're looking at it. You have one break that's over here 60 foot away. You have another break over here that's 60 foot away. In between is PVC pipe that's already stressed. So rather than having a fix here, then fixing this piece and waiting for the middle piece to break, we decided to go ahead and replace the entirety of the entire line. So we have at least another couple more days of getting materials in and putting that line back in. So hopefully by Friday, it'll all be buttoned up. We'll be disinfecting and turning it back on Monday or Tuesday.
Wow.
So
Why would a new pipe like that be breaking? So
under stress from what we've seen. And so the one we did in 2022 in the same area, the plan and profile shows that there's supposed to be a drop in that area, about a 45-degree bend for a drop. There was no fittings or anything else. It was just, I'm going to take this pipe and I'm going to push it down and make it work.
Seriously?
Yep. And so when we went back today, this morning and started digging, there's a 45 there. And so you bend, go off of Grogan's to go on to research. And so we just figured they're going to bend it again. Well, we found the fittings, so they definitely put the fittings in. The interesting thing though is the brake isn't at the fitting side. The brake's actually on the other side where the PVC is, which tells me that as they were going this way, they started bending the pipe to hit this drop over here that didn't put in way back in this area. Because I was expecting the crack to go from the fitting south. Instead, it's going from the other connection to the other PVC pipe north. And so that's why we're replacing the entirety of that, basically 80 foot at this point.
You know the vendor that did that project?
We did.
And is there any compensation?
That was all included in the lawsuit back in whenever that ended years ago.
Hmm.
The outcome of that, it was signed, sealed, confidential, I guess.
You just get whatever you get.
Yeah.
10 years from now or whatever.
As far as I know, because nobody outside of like the 3 or 4 and then the attorneys that dealt with it, I've got no idea. I just know senior management knows what we can and cannot do, and I let them know what we see and take pictures, and they do whatever the outcome was. So, but that company is no longer in business. That's the good news. So that's all I have unless you have any other.
Any other questions for Chris? All right, thanks. All right, item 11, receive update regarding status of the Panther Branch project.
Right.
Eric, is that you?
Yes, so we held a stakeholder meeting a few weeks ago. Went through a lot of different options that the engineers come up with. If you'll recall, as we've talked about in the past, the model that was created and it's kind of sitting at where it's at, contemplated cleaning up bear and panther branches and then putting some detention ponds at Gosling, the northwest corner of Gosling and Richards Forest. As we know, the latest cost estimate on that exceeds the funds that we have. And so we met with the engineer and the stakeholders to identify, where do we go from here? And so it was essentially unanimous with the stakeholders to proceed with utilizing the model that they've been building for the last year and a half now and running some different scenarios before we identify how to use the funds and if we can use the funds for whatever solution is the path, as I just described it, the right solution to even be cutting or chopping up. And so the idea was, let's look at a couple of different options, utilize the model to run some scenarios at it. One of the options that was agreed upon was essentially to not do the detention necessarily, but to clean out the ditches and see what value that has and see what downstream effects it has. The other option is to do the clean out of the ditches, but then also clean out and do some potential detention pond further downstream of Gosling. So further down to the east and south as well. So those two items, not to exceed $20,000, was kind of the unanimous choice from the group. And the engineer, I think, suggested that they would have that information or those models run or the scenarios run by Thanksgiving. So I was
doing scenario 5 too.
yeah, scenario 5,
Okay.
basically that's data collection of, I think, the stream gauges and the information that's from as far as evaluating the historical effects of the historical storms that we've had.
Make sure we're not getting more water. So
From the areas,
gauges
around us, that's correct.
upstream.
So, so that's in progress. And once we do have the data back from them, when they've run the model, we'll likely get the stakeholder group back together, see if one of those other options was more viable in terms of benefit to the project. And then we will I suspect the group will probably look at it and say, okay, whichever of these options that we've evaluated is more viable now, what do we have money to do what? And at what benefit to the community? And then make some decisions from there. So fair.
Yeah, one was basically cleaning out and then two added on the detention area. And
Yeah, the problem with cleaning out, if you clean out too much, which is what you want to do, because you want to speed the water up to get it out of here so it doesn't slow down and build up as much as quick. But when you do that, you speed it up going downstream. And so you can't adversely affect folks downstream of that area that you've just sped up. So that's why you would typically detain it in a pond to re-slow it down and then release it separately. That's the idea of the ponds. But we thought, well, maybe there's not that much of an adverse effect to where it does, have some benefit. But we won't know until the model's run, and I think that's the benefit of the model.
Yeah.
We get to do that. So I'm looking forward to the results.
And we did beat them up for 10 grand off the price.
Indeed, and they agreed to it. So
Yeah, that was an easy one.
That it then? Or
yes, for that one.
11? Okay, item 12, the water reclamation facility number 1 decision matrix, which was in your meeting material. And
Yes.
I think, Eric, you're going to lead us through this discussion.
I'll start it off.
Yeah.
So if you recall, SJ has a new third-party consultant, Corello Engineers, that is evaluating the 4 options of wastewater treatment plant number 1. So that's ongoing. I think the results of that evaluation is expected to be done by May or June or so of next year. In addition to that, it was agreed upon that Corello would develop what would be called a decision matrix to assist the MUDs in eventually making the decision once the 4 options are evaluated, and to help with the evaluation to come to some consensus somewhere down the road. And so Corello presented, which there's a copy of the PowerPoint presentation there for you last month or last week at the trustee meeting. What you'll see here is essentially 2 sheets that have some blue on it. Those are what I'll call kind of the definitions of the 7 criteria that they've identified to evaluate the plants on, all the options on. And then they've gone a further step into creating a sub-criteria within each of those 7 parent or main criteria. And so there was some discussion at the trustee meeting that kind of revolved around looking at the details of the sub criteria and kind of how things are worded and what made sense. And so it was agreed upon that the trustees would present comments to me by the end of November. And so I would offer that the MUDs do the same thing. And so all the directors kind of take a look at this. If you have any questions, present those to me and then I'll get them to Corello. The action item that will be needed along the way, in addition to getting comments on this, is that each MUD in January will need to provide a comparison worksheet, which is this last page in your packet. And the intention of this is to identify from the board's perspective what they are most interested in, whether it's established technology or operability or cost, basically the seven criteria. The sub criteria are not contemplated in this. They are obviously sub to the criteria, but when filling this out, you would merely look at the comparison here and choose one or the other. And so and that would be due so that we can get that to the consultant in January. What we've suggested to some of the MUDs is, and I think most are kind of moving down this path, is to have each director fill one out and then compile that as a result and compile that into one. I know one group wanted to do a workshop meeting to kind of come to a consensus as a whole. Ultimately, if you do it 5 and we could consolidate it, we would bring it back to you so you can kind of see what the consolidated summary would be, because we're going to end up with one for each mud to present.
Up with these criteria.
The engineer
How did they come up with this?
through those are industry standards from their experience.
I think you brought this up at the trustee meeting, the whole idea of having this type of matrix, if I remember correctly. And what's your experience with it?
Well, I mean, this is used, I've used it in the past. I mean, if you got a lot of criteria and you're trying to evaluate a lot of alternatives, it's a good way to kind of sort out some things, right? And you can clearly kind of get rid of the tail, some things that just don't look like they're going to make it based on people. But I think my overall comment on this was, you have to have some kind of unit of measure to be able to apply to this. So like complexity of operation is not in itself a unity of measure. Cost is, right? It's easy to know cost is dollars, but is it? And I think they were talking about NPV, which is an awesome achievement and accomplishment. So thank you. That made me really happy to see that one. But complexity, for example, if I could pick on that one, or operational flexibility, complexity could be good or bad. I mean, it can be good because it gives you flexibility. I mean, a really complex plant could be highly automated, right? Highly instrumented, and have a high instrumentation, and therefore it could, maybe run really tightly and within a band and maybe respond to things quicker, but maybe you can't run it manually, or maybe it can respond to a wider range of influence, but that comes with a cost, which gets into like another one, which is training. Is the requirement to have training a good or bad thing? Well, if you're kind of in the operations, maybe knowing new technology is a good thing. Training, but also enters up in cost, right? So a lot of these things kind of touch on each other. And I think that's what we said. We got to get a feeling for, if we're talking about complexity, is it complexity compared to like what we have today? It would be like comparing it to my first car, or the car that I had 50 years ago, or the car that I bought 10 years ago. That'd be two very different comparisons. We need to have some more detail in here, I think, for us to get our minds into this, to say, first of all, how would I rank this overall piece? Because this operability, even that very first one, I wouldn't know how to score it today.
Well, that's what I was looking over this on the weekend going, I don't get this with,
So some more work has to go in that.
Yeah.
I think that was a takeaway, right, from Grollo, that, okay, we need to kind of put some more meat on the bone here. We need to maybe tease some of these apart, because some of them have 3 or 4 things kind of happening inside them. But overall, I think what's even kind of more important is that we agree that we're actually going to use this,
well,
right? That this is going to lead us to an outcome and a decision that we're actually going to live by.
Because
Otherwise, we're just, Yeah.
This is the way the old board, there was a task force or something that went over the waste options. And I think that board came out with MBR, and they used a decision matrix of some sort. They were all asked to evaluate, well, how do you rate the smell and the operation and the cost? And they came out with MBR, and it didn't work. I mean, here we are today. We should be moving towards MBR. I think of Paul Brown represented us on that board, and Bruce Cunningham, and all of that work is gone, because now we're looking at these 4 options. I wanted to make one other comment that's unrelated to what I just said, but looking at the 7 criteria, the life cycle cost is the top priority for me. And I thought, if we know that, or I know that's the most important thing to me, if we can look at evaluate every variation in option into cost, and then use the other weights, then look at the rest of the matrix and help that make our decision.
So I think the way this will work is just by ranking. We're not weighting these top priorities, these 7. We're not weighting them, but we're going to rank them.
Okay, so
Right.
I think for me, cost is 1, right?
So yeah, so you will score it that way, right? And if 5 of us are doing that, if we all think that is, then Mud 47 will have kind of like cost at the front.
Yeah.
And now when they actually go do and get into the sub criteria, then they're putting some ranges around it, like from 1 to 5, how does this fit? right? So that's where the weighting of the sub-criteria is also important. Because it'll take that top ranking of the big category and will move it over based on certain weighting of these sub-criteria. And that's where the scoring will actually start happening. Okay, but actually all of them, I think, Eric, is some of the questions that I have, and which I'll get to, is that are all 7 of these ultimately weighted the same? They're going to be ranked from 1 to 7, but I think they're all weighted in kind of a linear fashion. Maybe I should say, are they weighted in a linear fashion, or do these sub-criteria weightings really drive it? I don't know the answer to that quite yet. Brad, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at slide 11 in the PowerPoint, they take your comparative rankings and create ratings based upon that data. So ultimately, the 7 categories are weighted.
You are weighted.
Yes.
Okay.
Based on the results of your preferences.
So the comparative ranking is a means to get at weighting, because they need a weighting to do the ultimate scoring.
So we'll have one ranking
Right.
coming from
From our
each of the
board.
MUDs. Each of the MUDs will then go in and be jammed together to create a Woodlands ranking. Is that right? Or we're going to have 10 different,
Entries.
you're going to run 10 all the way through the whole process. Okay. Plus SJRA. So there'll be 11 total, right?
That was what.
So the same criteria will apply to each of the 4 different models, right? If you want to call it that.
You run each alternative through this process and kind of get an answer. And I think that's where the magic occurs.
I don't know if I saw like each of those 4 in writing. I know we talked about them a couple months ago. You know, the 4 scenarios, or however you want to say, you know, replace in place or
Repair and.
repair and maintain, or, you know.
There was an initial email from Ed, and I think there was maybe a revised one that listed out,
Yeah, then it was
and
summarized
it's in the
there, then it was summarized in the trustee
There was-
report.
there was-
slide. Yeah, what page?
It's in a lot of forms.
Slide 4.
Slide 4.
But they don't have this slide. So,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's here.
That's here.
So we have it now. Yeah.
That old task force we had, they were all in the same room. And we're not even in the same room. And they all though came up with the same thing. But then when they came out of the room, no one bought into it. I
Well,
just.
some did and some didn't. I think one of the flaws was total cost, total dollars, wasn't a net present value, which just said, we'll always tell you to do it now versus later, because everything's always going to cost more in the future, but time value does matter, I think, right? And it was weighted very heavily on cost, and the rest were kind of de minimis, actually. So I don't know. I mean, that's the stakeholder result. I don't know if that's going to be the same here. Again, if we don't agree to use this, but the problem I think we have is all 4 alternatives have not been matured to the same level of certainty, right? Maybe they will be, but we don't have a cost on each one of these that would be comparable, I think, in plus or minus 20% or 30%.
Yeah, I think we will.
Hope so.
Yeah, more alternatives are complete. I would expect that.
Are we going to have new data on each 4 of these?
In May and June, when
Yeah.
when the evaluation's done. Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing a new, I just want to make sure I understood it correctly, that they're doing a whole new study on that. So, you know, and I understand why Hugh brought up the matrix from watching the trustee meetings. And, I agree, it is kind of frustrating to, do all this and then go, okay, where are we? But some of the stuff like the Freeze Nickel report, I just don't want to get into the same, I'm concerned that, and answer me this, because I'm not really sure on the matrix thing. So Hugh kind of indicated that we haven't decided. I thought we had decided to go with the matrix. Or
Yeah, but the
Or some
sub-criteria
We're going to
definition,
go through the process. I don't know what
Right,
that's, yeah.
I think the sub-criteria, right now, I think as a in draft form, I think the sub-criteria definitions need to be clarified. That was what was addressed last week. And then also all of the directors will also need to kind of go through this and ask any questions, comments that they have. Those will also be provided to the consultant, and ideally, they answer our questions and clean it up to the board's likings and the trustees' liking.
That's how
And we
much.
can trust that
Yeah.
this is something worth going forward with.
I just didn't want to get into a point, my problem with this was, when I go through the technical analysis, it was somewhere close to 2/3 of these things, even though it was 5 years. I remember you were in a meeting, I thought it was 6.5, and it was 5 years because I went back and looked at this. Like 2/3 of these had between 10 and 30-year lives on them. And so I was thinking, why do we need to replace them within 5 years? So, how do we deal with, discrepancies like that where we, are we going to see that kind of data in the end? I'm just concerned that we lock ourselves in to, we're going to decide this way and not be able to have any say on, well, hey, well, why'd the data come out like that? Or why is it being presented like that kind of thing?
Maybe think of it this way.
And that's where we
Brad.
had issues
Yeah.
in the past, I think.
The good thing about doing this before you have all the answers is that you're basically saying, this is how I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to use this criteria to end up with an answer. And I don't know what the starting point is. In other words, if I said that cost was the most important, and I wanted to really skew it, and I knew that one was cheaper, I'd put the biggest weighting on it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that though. And actually reuse of existing equipment is one of them, right?
Yeah.
So how do you measure that? Like is it in percent or is it in dollars of using reuse? Or, do I ultimately save money with that? It kind of comes down to cost. So this kind of says, okay, regardless of what you know about these projects, is this a good decision criteria? To me, I'm more worried about a call to action.
Right.
And that results in us actually doing something,
Right.
picking something and then funding it.
And I got that. And I like that.
I hope we can get there. I hope we don't get through all this and we get right back to the beginning.
That's what I worry
We've only
about.
been doing that for 10 years. Maybe we can stop it.
So when we do the scoring, is the subcategories going to change then? Or are we going to get a new one before we score or?
Should get a new
We're
one.
just doing the ranking to start, the pair.
Yeah.
Okay.
But concurrently, based on your comments,
Yeah.
presenting those to the consultant, they will evaluate your comments and make adjustments or clarifications based on whatever those are.
Yeah.
Whatever those comments are. So if there's questions about the specific subcategory weightings, then I would share that, so that they're aware of it for sure.
I mean, each of them are going to add up to 100, right? So you
Yeah.
can kind of, I guess if you thought there was one that's missing or one that you could scratch, I think they're looking for some feedback and willing to take some feedback, which is good.
And they seem very open to, adjusting as needed. So
Yeah.
I was appreciative of that as well.
I watched the presentation. It was just, you couldn't see the screen in the video, but but once I got the packet, I could watch it again.
So do we have to, do you want us to, one of the things I was thinking, Eric, just to make my thinking visible, that I think it's always beneficial to hear other people's perspectives in something like this, right? I'd like to hear what you have to say and your thoughts and asking questions of Eric or Carollo and trying to say, how do I think about space requirements for constructions? What does it really mean? Is there adequate space? Well, if there isn't, then I think that alternative is like, you can't do it. To me, that'd be like hard to do something that you don't have space to build, right? But if we can get through that, I think we'd benefit from hearing that amongst each other rather than just taking it home and doing it over a cup of coffees with one morning and just saying, well, I think this, and we'd be interpreting these things a little differently. I like us maybe doing our own thing, filling out our own scorecard, as it were, but listening to each other kind of before that.
Definitely. I
Right.
would
Yeah.
benefit from that.
I would.
because I've
So we're
never-
talking about like having a workshop that we go and think about this, write all of our stuff, come back together and then discuss it and then have a.
I think that's what we're
Night front?
discussing.
Sounds like a called meeting.
That's an alternative that. What are the other MUDs done? Have you given us any idea what the?
Several are gonna go off and do their own and then coming back. And one has done exactly what you're describing, which is, let's just have a workshop. The December agendas will be, several of the MUD meetings are gonna be canceled. And then some are saying, well, let's just have a workshop and just focus on this.
Yeah,
And have a one.
that gives us the month to study it and to really
Get some cleanup.
think about
cleanup
it
comes.
and know that when we're coming back with what we feel about this and then compare and contrast.
Yeah.
And then go off and kind of do our own
I like that.
ranking, do the
Yeah,
Because
Hearing, yeah.
it's hard to look at it right now and go, okay, this is what I would do. But yeah, I'd like to think about it for a little bit and then come back.
So now that we've had it explained a lot more and also what the end result is going to be, knowing that we're going to give this to the consultant and realizing that, he's going to matriculate through everything of not just us, but all the other MUDs and then come back. What can we feed to him that's going to be useful?
Yeah.
So I'd be game to do this in December. Put
Yeah.
this on the agenda for December and just have it, this is our
Is it an
meeting.
agenda thing or is it something we just do on our own? I mean, is it an open meeting?
Yeah, we'd have to post the meeting. It can
Okay,
be.
that's fine. I'm
That's,
just,
I mean, it is nothing that's proprietary. I mean, it's an open discussion.
Yeah,
If you're gonna have deliberation about it, then you gotta post an agenda.
yeah.
perfect, that's fine.
But we can make an adjustment to not include all the standard meeting items if you choose.
Just do it on the same day.
If you choose, yeah. It's open, obviously, so we can just keep the same time frame. If that's your.
And it doesn't mean at the end of all this that we have to go with what the matrix tells us.
Then why are we doing it?
But,
That's my question.
but we might,
I
but
don't
we
know.
might.
I don't know that we will. We haven't.
Well, I think that gets into the supplement agreement and all that. We have a commitment to invest and change, right? We got to do something.
Okay.
Otherwise, this is a waste of time otherwise. I think.
I think we can come to
So I
consensus.
hopefully we can get there. So.
Yeah.
You guys are all okay on that?
Yep.
What our December meeting is on the 17th.
Works for me.
Be here.
Same time, same batch, yeah.
That's right.
We don't have to do it that day, I guess, but that
But
would
why
probably
not?
be convenient for everyone else. Is that okay with y'all? Staff and everything?
Yeah, I guess the only caveat would be that the other district that's doing the same thing is right before you. So if they go over, I don't know how long it'll take. Does it?
We won't go over.
Okay.
Oh,
A
yeah.
long workshop.
Yeah.
Able to
7.
get there in an hour and a half.
No,
All right.
that can work.
Well, we'll keep it. It's on everyone's
Yeah.
calendar if that works for y'all.
Yeah.
Make it easy.
Perfect. But in the meantime, Eric, you do want us to feed information back to you. You said by the end of November.
And that's.
Can we do it like maybe the end of the first week? I'm about to leave for Japan. I won't be back to the first.
It's a
So
nice 14-hour plane ride.
it is 14. I'm
No.
born in Haneda, so
If we want to have a workshop by 2 weeks later, then no, we need to have it by the first of the month. So the second is a Monday, so that's kind of the target zone there. That way we can get those comments to the consultant. They'll have enough time to at least
Yeah.
rewrite this so that you can have a productive conversation about the subgrade.
Yeah.
So yeah, best you can, start knocking it out, at least the questions.
it'll make me work on my vacation.
You're expecting this by the 1st of December.
No, that.
Just
Yeah.
feedback on any of that.
Yeah, the comparison deal you'll do at your December meeting and that'll be due in January.
Yeah.
So if we need to, finish it up in January, so be it. But-
So just feedback.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just feedback.
Yeah.
On a subcategory.
Correct.
Yeah. And any questions, the overall process that you may have, right? I think it's worth.
Sure, that may never end. I mean, we'll see how our next meeting goes.
All right, that's good. Item 12, we've on there. Okay, move to item 13, consider and direct trustees to vote on the appointment of a vacant water agency seat on the SJR GRP Review Committee. Item 13, that's some information on 46 and 47 on our two nominated candidates.
Yes, so just to give you some background, WWA has a seat on the GRP Advisory Committee. Advisory Committee is made up of 6 individuals from around the county, members of the GRP. Your representative for WWA has been Mike Mooney, the deputy GM for WWA. He, as part of his retirement from WWA, he also turned in his resignation of that committee, which opened up a seat on that committee. So that committee is, so from WWA's standpoint, the trustees are to be voting on the appointment of the replacement of Mike. And so at the trustee meeting last week, the trustees agreed to push the discussion down to the mud level to hear more about it, and then also to theoretically direct the trustee on how to vote at a future meeting, likely the December meeting. So there were basically two candidates that kind of rose up. I had made recommendation of Kim Wright, your new deputy general manager, who you haven't met yet. Kim Wright is here. The new deputy, she started 2 weeks ago. And then Brad Hauk had also expressed interest. And so we put it on all the agendas. Their bios are in your packet. And so they are here to answer any questions or for you to hear from them if you so choose. So they're here.
Yeah, so I think each of you may have something we have the information here, but you have some time to chat.
Information in the
Chat with us.
packet, and so I just wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to tell you a little bit about me and my philosophy on the GRP review committee. So, as you know, the GRP was planned and the surface water treatment plant was constructed as a solution for large volume groundwater users to achieve compliance with local rules and regulations. Although there are currently no rules and regulations in place, the existing GRP contract signed by converted and non-converted participants remains in place. There is a responsibility of the GRP review committee members to advise in a manner that considers the needs that exist for today and in the future, along with consideration of the cost associated with meeting those needs. As a representative of the GRP review committee, I recognize the need to make available and provide the needed resources, such as affordable, clean drinking water and utilities for this area, while also making decisions that protect our aquifers, not only today, but also for in the future. There may be limitations with the existing GRP contract with adding new participants and no rules and regulations currently in place to drive the need or demand for surface water. However, we must remain vigilant to think outside the box, collaborate cohesively to promote efficiency and continue to increase the utilization of the surface water treatment plant when we can. Although I'm not an engineer, my knowledge, background, and experiences are diverse. I am technically minded. You do not have to be an engineer to understand projects, budgets, asset management, operations, maintenance. One must, however, be engaged in the details when required and supported by knowledgeable resources and staff. Of course, relationships and communications are key in making all this happen. My ability to serve on the GRP review committee should not be discounted due to the perception that there may be a lack of technical or engineering experience. It is much, much more than that. I have successfully planned for and managed multi-million-dollar assets, budgets, and capital projects in multiple roles. I have collaborated significantly to achieve operational successes and to meet defined goals. This has been possible by not knowing all the answers, but through my understanding and experiences, collaboration, and accurate data gathering to make recommendations and informed decisions. I could not have done it without diversified and collaborative teams that have included strong leadership, engineers, technical services staff, administrative staff, maintenance, operations staff, legal, directors, committees. It's a team. I am a Woodlands Water Agency employee. I'm not in an elected position. I'm neutral. My background in this industry and working in multiple disciplines reflects my ability and desire to work with the public and to support those in our community. I am the right person to represent the Woodlands Mud. Would be honored to do so. I ask for your support. I ask for your vote. I ask for you to recommend to your trustee to consider placing me in that position. And then lastly, but not least, I just want to say thank you guys for the opportunity to be here. I really look forward to working with Eric and the Woodlands Water team, the directors, and the trustees. So I appreciate your consideration.
Kim, what kind of change would you want to work to affect in the GRP board?
So I think that, I mean, I really do think thinking outside the box, to continue to, yeah, the contracts are limiting. I get that, right? You know, they were written a certain way, but we do need to explore what options may be possible to consider bringing in new participants if there's demands. I mean, obviously it's going to be the needs that drive the, you know, those opportunities, right? But, you know, that is something that maybe we look at and we plan for it. So when those opportunities become available, we have a plan, right? So of course, that's going to be engaging legal and stakeholders potentially to understand, you know, what options are there. If that is an option, I don't know, but that is a limitation that we know exists. And so looking at that, but we really do need to look at what can we do to utilize the plant in a way that the costs are, you know, at a level that are affordable, but at the same time, but look at protecting, we really, you know, we need to protect our aquifers as well. And so anyway.
Why is this such a problem for the GRP? Why, like pricing, they didn't understand how pricing models work? Like what got us to this point?
Well, and I'm no longer there, but I will tell you, having been there and been over a rate study and the development of a rate model for the GRP, I do at a high level know and have been involved in, they do rate studies. They're required to do rate studies. They take the budgets, they plug those into a rate model, and it gives them, correct me if something's changed, but a range of where those rates should fall. And so, you know, I'm sorry, what was your question?
But just in general, why are they in this situation right now of poor utilization numbers and just simple things like understanding pricing structures?
Say there used to be a groundwater pumping mandate, which means there used to be, you have to put curbs on groundwater
That's
pumping.
right.
And there's no more curbs almost.
That's right.
110,000 acre feet per year is what they're allowed to pump, which is basically no curb.
Yeah.
So without a mandate,
That's right.
there's no reason to buy really expensive water.
That's
So we're all walking away from a $500 million wastewater, all right, a surface water treatment plant.
The result
That's right.
of that, it all ties back to Lone Star. So Lone Star dishes out the well permits for an entity that might need water to drill a well. And when there were regulations, the regulations would say, you know, the overall pumpage from the wells across the county has to be X. And Lone Star would look at that and say, oh, well, we're getting close to that, so I can't give you a well permit. You're going to need to find an alternative water source. So there was a mandate that required a new user to go find an alternative water source. So the S2A GRP wasn't the only GRP that was created across the county. There were multiple ones. I was involved in several where those entities went out and figured their own situation out, not necessarily with the surface water. In this case, those entities, you know, said, okay, I can't solve or don't want to solve my own problem by finding either building my own surface water plant or, you know, just candidly, some of the other GRPs that consisted of municipalities drilling into a different aquifer that wasn't classified under this restriction, basically a deeper aquifer called the Catahoula. That's how some of them solved it. But those that either didn't want to or couldn't said, well, I'll just join the big one. And the SJA was the bigger one, and the surface water facility was built. Surface water facility was built, and you have to correct me on this, I was involved in it on the private side back in the day because I had clients that it affected. You know, my clients were having to answer this question: do I join GRP or the SJA's GRP, or do I create my own? My understanding was that the GRP facility was built with the anticipation that that regulation would continue to drive customers to them.
Yeah.
But when that regulation got killed, then there's no incentive. And then what happened is that level that I mentioned, Lone Star increased it by 50% from 64,000 to 97,000. So now they can continue to dish out well permits to developers across the county that need more water. So the developers come say, hey, can I get a well permit? Am I under 97? Yep, sure. Here you go. And so there's no incentive for those developers. And, you know, generally, most people know that drilling wells are really cheap. I mean, this area of Texas and this area of the United States, we are extremely fortunate in the Houston metro area that we can get good, clean, cheap groundwater. Problem is we've found that it's not forever. It's not. So that's kind of the rub. You've got to find something that will drive customers to want to pay a little bit more.
And that hasn't been done yet.
Yeah.
It hasn't, well, since the regulations were kind of removed in 2020.
2018 was the year they got elected, and the first board meeting, they threw out the lawsuit that was to keep the mandate in end of 2018.
So nothing's been done for 6 years.
Suing each other.
Not from, well, Lone Star holds the responsibility of being the governmental agent that would create that mandate.
But I'm sorry, to improve the utilization of the plan.
Yeah,
Nothing's really been.
I think my recollection was that the way that the rates were structured originally was to not have winners and losers if people
That's-
join the GRP plan, that you wouldn't be disincentivized from using surface water because they would equalize the rates that the GRP would have to pay a pro rata share of whatever it would cost to produce that water. So you didn't have this imbalance. But the problem is now that you don't have regulations for groundwater users, you don't have anybody else joining the GRP. So you don't have any more users that are paying in, even though they're not receiving surface water. And then you hit this tipping point where if you produce more surface water, I think the costs go up. Well, that's what we hear, the cost that goes up to produce the surface water. So you're gonna have to come up with a different rate scheme. This is from the outside looking in. They're gonna have to come up with a different rate scheme for these additional users that would like to use surface water that's different from the rate arrangement in the legacy GRP plan, because the cost to produce, or to drill wells is going up. I mean, we see it used to be $1 million. Now it's $3 to $4 million. So you are getting at that tipping point where folks are saying, instead of going and drilling that $3 or $4 million well, and you got a surface water trunk line right here close, I really would like to tap into that. That'd be a whole lot cheaper, even if you've got a separate rate structure for these users. So it seems like there may be a path, but it's a matter of, figuring that out.
And I think there are also, I can't recite it, but I believe there's also some hurdles within the contracts between the SRA and GRP members
Yeah.
about adding new members. Again, that was contemplated when there was regulation, different expectations. So that hurdle will need to be
Oh, yeah.
addressed as well.
Absolutely.
So may I join the conversation?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, you guys are answering.
So let me
questions.
correct.
Tim, I got another question
Let me
for if you
correct
guys
a
are
couple
done
things
answering.
right now,
questions.
okay? And I'll talk about my background a little bit, but I think there was a comment made that when there's a demand, okay, implying there's no demand for increased surface water. That, I think it's factually incorrect, okay? I think 3 entities have gone to the groundwater GRP asking for access to surface water. The GRP has told them no. Now, recently, they've adjusted, they're going to drop one participant so they can add another. But we had a GRP in place who basically had a request to sell more surface water, and they told them no. Okay?
And do you know why? Was that
I
just
don't know what that
the
information
existing
wasn't
contract?
supposed to be.
Because of the pricing model. Yeah.
But I think we need to be clear on the facts that there was a request for more surface water sales. Okay?
But not,
It was not
but not from
demand.
new users.
No, they weren't new users.
They were not. They were current GRP members.
That's not what I was told.
Well,
That's
that's
the request.
You mentioned that yesterday, but that needs to be clarified.
I run the board. So who was a request from that was denied?
I was told there was 3 requests and they were denied. Okay, and now they brought in a new person by getting rid of an old person.
So Mid-South, their facilities burned down. They asked to be taken off, right? And so Mid-South is the one that's no longer receiving it. That's going to MUD 88, 89, east side. Then we have WC.
So they're increasing their rate,
Actually, new surface water.
new surface water.
Right.
Okay,
But
Do
they're,
you have-
they're taking it. They haven't been denied.
Yeah, right, but you said there was no request for new users.
They were denied.
Well, no, they're an existing participant that wants to now receive surface water. So
They're
they're
a
not,
GRP member,
yeah, it's just,
Over
not a
converted.
user.
They were, right, they're one of those not receiving.
Well, let's be clear.
Yeah.
yeah, it's just terminal.
Just because you're a member of GRP doesn't mean you're a user of the surface water.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
So I said they're not a current user of surface water. I didn't say they're not a member of GRP.
Okay.
Okay? So let's keep the facts clear. Okay? Okay. So there has been demand, there is demand, there should be more demand. The current GRP board has been sitting there for years, not addressing the issue of how do we come up with a plan that's feasible so we can grow the use of surface water. Okay, so I'll let you finish your discussion, but I felt like there was a discussion going on that I was kind of being excluded from
You
that.
got kind of carried away.
Carried away.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
So as the GM of Southern Mud, I know you're involved in the lawsuit with Grace Woodlands Church. How could that damage your professional, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the term, but how's that going to look on you? Could it potentially damage your reputation is what I'm looking at? If it,
Well, I would hope not. I've been in the industry quite a long time, and that is between my board. My board's the policy makers and the church, right? I was the general manager, obviously oversaw the staff. But I can't, speculate. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I've been in the industry long enough, that I think everybody around knows me, and so
I don't understand your question.
I don't either.
so I was wondering if it comes with a negative outcome of that lawsuit, will that damage her professional?
I'm not named in the suit. It just so
Oh, you're not,
happened.
okay.
No, sir.
Wasn't sure if you're
No,
named.
I was just a leader of the district, obviously, and, but yeah, implementing the policies and procedures that our board had adopted through a rate order. And it was the non-taxable entity TAP fee that's caused the lawsuit. So, yeah, I was the general manager over the district and, but implementing the adopted rate order, which included a non-taxable entity TAP fee, which is a common thing in our industry. Yeah.
I don't see how any more than Eric, us being, well, WWA's in a lawsuit, which we probably could be in a dozen if we wanted to, would affect your personal or professional reputation. I don't see that.
Can we discuss this?
Oh, we
Or
haven't
we
heard
can-
from Brett yet.
I have another question are we done with? Do you have other questions? I just had one. So you have relationships with some of the folks in GRP, you worked over there and all that. That can be seen as a plus or a minus potentially. Could you
Yeah.
maybe speak to any of the concerns you may have on those relationships, either hindering you or helping you, being independent, kind of making decisions, being maybe controversial, or, because it could be old colleagues and things like that.
Right.
Just speak to that a little bit if you could.
I'm a very, I'm not the type to follow the lead. I've always been the type to gather my own information, make my own decisions, and voice my opinion based on the information that I have, and not to necessarily be skewed. I think that's what you're asking, if I would be influenced in some way. I can confidently say that that's just not my approach. It's not. It's gathering, and I touched on that in the information I just presented. I gather the information to make sure I have accurate facts, reach out to the right resources to get those answers, and then make decisions based on that. So.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry.
And you feel confident you could challenge old colleagues potentially as you need.
Even sitting here talking about the contract that's in place, I totally agree, that, yeah, there are limitations and stuff. We know that.
Contracts can agree to be amended.
That's right. Yeah. And so
All day
that
long.
discussion needs to be had, maybe, it's not possible, but just circling back, we are hearing that that's a concern. Circling back and touching on that and really understanding why, what are those limitations and how do we overcome those obstacles, so.
I guess I
But-
have one more question. So if we chose you and we made a bad decision,
Mhm.
should we appoint someone new in 6 months or 12 months?
I think the appointment, if I can look, I think it's for the term,
It's for the term unless she would
which is
resign.
until January of 27.
Or whoever would be resigning, right?
Yeah.
Not you per se.
Yeah, not you. I don't know you. But
Not good.
just wondering how permanent, there's
We want to see results, right?
yeah, some
See progress.
that if you're going up there and just rubber stamping stuff.
It's 2 years.
Well, and this isn't advice, that is one thing to really emphasize, and that you mentioned rubber stamp.
Yeah.
This is an advisory committee, so I'm not sure how familiar y'all are with the GRP review committee. The GRP review committee makes recommendations to the GRP administrator, who is Chris. Chris goes before the board of directors, and he is the one that makes those recommendations. It's the SJRA board that makes those decisions. It is not the GRP review committee. That's really important to understand that.
It's an influence role.
It is.
Influencing.
It is. It's just advisory.
Do you have influence on the SGRA board?
I do not. I'm not engaged at all with the board anymore. So, yeah. So, and I was never, sorry, my mouth's getting dry, but I was never in a role like that anyway. I was a division manager and I did work closely with the GM at one time with the board, but my role was division management in the Highlands.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Most of you guys know me. I'm Brett Houck, Director and Trustee for Mud 7, Trustee to the WWA Board. I think you can tell from tonight, I feel very passionate about the use of groundwater. Very passionate about water in general. Also very passionate about the change is needed. The existing organization's been in place for a number of years. Unfortunately, our WWA rep has supported the status quo over these years. As people have come forward, we failed to make a compelling case for why we need to increase the capacity, not the capacity, but the throughput of that plant. We as taxpayers have funded a tremendous investment in sitting there running at about half full. That's a disgrace. That's a disappointment. But it's not only the lack of good use of capital deployed, it's a significant impact upon our use of groundwater versus surface water. If you look at the packet you received today, you'll see where the well levels are. They're struggling to stay level, if not going down, simply going down. Why is that? Because we're using more water than the aquifers can give up. Okay, we need change to come before the GRP. We need change agents to drive that group. And yes, I understand the River Authority Board makes the final decision, but I will bet you in probably 99% of the cases, that board approves what's been presented to them. Okay, so
I remember asking Eric about that. I don't think they've ever gone against what the board's recommending.
yeah, so it's a very, very important position to go into. It's 6 people, 1 person can provide influence. A lot of the votes have been very close. 1 additional vote in one direction could change the direction of the GRP. My background's in the packet, chemical engineer, Georgia Tech, 40+ years in the industry, all sorts of technical work, economic analysis, business planning, decision analysis. You'll talk about the decision matrix, very familiar with that type of activity. I think if you put your trust in me, 2 things I'll promise. One is I will work to make change. I will work to increase the throughput of that plant. I will work to ensure that as a community, we make maximum use of or appropriate use of surface water, so that we can maintain the quality of our water supply here, not only in the Woodlands, but throughout the county. Couple items I'll address that have come up in prior meetings. One is, well, how will I interact not being an employee? I don't think whether I'm an employee or non-employee impacts my ability to communicate. Eric and I can certainly work together. I'm committed to keeping him up to date. Just like Mike kept the trustees up to date, happy to do that. Happy to come back and inform the individual MUDs if needed to. One MUD particularly asked about, well, how do you feel about representing the WWA, not just your MUD? And I was kind of taken back at that. I see this position clearly as one to represent WWA. I'm not doing this as a MUD 7 representative. It's as a WWA representative. Okay. As far as commitment and longevity, I've been in the Woodlands 10 years. I've retired. I plan to stay here. So I'd be happy to serve in this position as long as you guys see fit. So it's not a matter of, what happens in 2 years. Well, I can continue to serve. So any other questions?
I was gonna ask you the same question I asked Kim, but you already kind of answered it about, what change you hope to affect there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting during yesterday, today to see how the conversations have kind of merged to a single talking point, which is everybody supports change now. But that's why I stepped forward. That's why I put my name in the hat. This is an opening. There are some questions about, well, why are you nominated? Well, because I care. I knew the opening occurred. I talked to some folks. I got nominated by other trustees. So it wasn't a surprise. I'm not trying to backdoor anything, trying to be totally transparent. The trustees elected to push it down to the MUDs so you guys could know who we are, what we stand for. But yeah, I think it's time for change. I think change is required to get the end result, which is increased throughput in that plant. And more than that, we have to figure out a way to win the hearts and souls of our community. Okay. There was, the early basis was you shall use surface water because of government dictate. When that went away, why did it go away? Because we never won the hearts and souls of the community that said surface water is important, and for the common good, we need to be using surface water. Okay, so a bunch of people stood up, threw that out, and now we're struggling. But as we talked about, the tipping point is coming, even from an economic standpoint. But we can't continue to stand behind the mantra of, well, we're bound by contracts and we just can't create an economic incentive for people to use surface water. We've got to overcome that. Okay. And it's surprising now that there's an opening, all of a sudden other people are standing up and saying, oh yeah, we need to relook that. Some people have been in charge for years. Okay. It's time to move forward. We've got Conroe building 4 new wells. Okay. How is that happening?
Got a question, Brad. So
Sure.
winning hearts and minds. So you get the spot and you get nothing but resistance from the existing members of that committee. How do you deal with it?
Well, I think the existing members are split. Okay. So I think potentially my addition might move the majority over. But even in the face of resistance, how do you do it? You continue dealing with facts. Okay. And I think you've got to be totally transparent. I think a lot of the pushback was people in the county are paying this fee. They don't know what it's for. They don't understand what good it's doing. Okay. Guy in Cut and Shoot says, I'm not getting any service water. Why am I paying this fee? Okay. You got to explain the pluses and the minuses, and you got to build a case. Okay. It's no different than any other business proposition. I think way too long, some of the utilities have been protected or hidden behind, well, we're a government utility. We don't have to explain what we do. We just do what we want to do. You can't do that anymore. You've got to be transparent. You've got to explain to the people why there's a better path. And drilling more wells is not the way to go.
So would you use something like what John works on with this marketing committee?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, everybody that's associated with GRP ought to have a elevator speech that says, this is why we should use more surface water. Okay. And if they're asked, why aren't we using more surface water? They ought to have a nice elevator speech response. Not, I can't talk about it because of legal challenges. Okay. So that's my pitch. I would ask your support. Any more questions?
Yeah, what kind of comment and question? I see this as, I don't see this as a technical role, by the way. I see it as more of a commercial leadership role, influence role. There's technical things to be concerned about, but
Yeah.
you can hire technical people to solve technical problems pretty easily.
It's an oversight position.
Yeah, and it needs a commercial mind. It needs somebody who can think through how do you kind of make it work for everyone. I mean, I can't tell you how many businesses get handed that had an old legacy structure that had a bunch of members that built stuff, and they all were declining or disappearing, and the new guys wanted to come in, and then, well, you have to pay your initiation fee like the rest of them did. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. I mean, if you want to go out of business, it does, but if you want to keep things running, you got to change, you got to shift, right? And I think that's what you're describing. But how do you think you would apply some of your background to coming up with some commercial alternatives or some commercial ideas to recraft a different model?
Well, I mean, I think first you got to put all the data on the table, have a clear understanding of what the base case is, and then look at your alternatives and understand where your constraints are, and then bust those constraints. Whether those constraints are legal constraints, or whether they're processing constraints, whether they're physical equipment constraints. Okay, I think there's been a failure to do that analysis to come up and say, this is what it would take to build a case to produce more surface water. So the rate study is a step in the right direction that they just spent a year and almost a year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay, to generate a 9-page report. Okay.
Model.
And a model. Okay. So I don't know about you, Chevron experience, a year and a half, you get a 9-page report. Okay, something's wrong. Okay. So, but I think you got to collect the data, you got to understand it. I don't have access to the data, so I can't tell you where all the issues are. But I can tell you, I would dig into them, okay, and figure out where are the constraints, where do we go, how do we bust them, okay?
Does the advisory committee have access to information and data, or are they under the tent or outside the tent?
It's really hard to say. It just depends. When it comes to legal items, it's all the same information y'all get because the review committee is not a client of the River Authority. So they get nothing on the legal side. If the rate study and the development of it, if it's going through legal review, then they don't see the rate study. At the end of it, they do have access, but it's basically a paper model, if you will. We've never actually released the model itself. So.
The data that feeds the model is visible.
Oh, yeah, it's the budget. Yeah, I mean, we'll print any information, just so it's open records, right? So anything the public can get, the review committee can get. And it's basically, there's nothing the review committee gets more than anybody else would. It's just whatever they ask for. Because we don't know what they want, so.
Yeah, I mean, so you got to be proactive, you got to be willing to dig, you got to be willing to ask the tough questions, okay? Otherwise, it's status quo. Okay, and how do you ask for a rate study and tolerate a 1-year delay in getting the result? Okay, to me, that's a lack of oversight. Okay? So I would appreciate your consideration. More than that, I appreciate your support, direction to your trustee to appoint me as the GRP representative for WWA. Thank you.
Thanks.
Internal discussion between ourselves or?
So we just chat, is that what we do? Just an open mic night?
Pretty much. I mean, it's up to the board how you want to handle direction you give to your trustee, if at all. I mean, we talk about advisory role. Well, this process is really advisory. The trustee in this situation is kind of like the River Authority board, where your trustee is the one who makes the vote. They can consider advisement from the board, but ultimately they have the vote. So you can either individually give your direction as to who you support as a nominee. You can pick a motion. It's up to y'all. There's not a legal constraint or requirement as to how that.
I feel passionately, so I'd like to say a few words on it.
Please do.
I became a MUD director in 2016, and in 2018, Restore Affordable Water took over the Lone Star Board. And that's when they threw out the groundwater pumping mandate. So I educated myself on this whole thing. Also, when I became a MUD director in 2016, I was amazed that an employee was representing us when we had 10 trustees that must have had all kinds of background and been passionate about this. It's a $500 million plant, and it's what caused our water rates to double. We all have to pay for it in Montgomery County. There is a water echo chamber. You'll find whether it's people on one side of the argument or the other. It's, you got your Simon Cicadas and your Mike Steckers and your Harry Hardmans. They're on one side. And then you have our resident interests, like Jackie Chance, who's on that GRP board. And I would personally align myself more with him because he is for finding conjunctive use, using both groundwater and surface water, and doing the right thing. 30 feet of water table drop translates to an inch of subsidence, and that affects us homeowners. People that are developers and would like to put up a sign that they're not members of the GRP anymore, and they don't have high water bills, they're going to sell a lot of homes. I think something that Brad said, and if you haven't detected yet, I'm very much in favor of Brad's candidacy here. That echo chamber that I just talked about, they're in their own echo chamber. No one else in the community, no one that's politically involved is in that. They have no idea what's going on. So when we asked the voters in Montgomery County to vote for a Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District board, they had no idea who they were voting for. They said, I would just want to know who the Republican, the Montgomery County Tea Party said they'd vote for. And because the Tea Party didn't know anything about it either, and the likes of Harry Hardman had more influence with the Republican Party, the residents of the Woodlands just gave it up. They voted in favor of restore affordable water, and we're not getting out of the GRP. It's not dropping. They didn't drop our water rates. No, we need to break this thing up. I love it that you're passionate about it. And you showed us this evening that you're willing to say, well, wait a minute, let's get to the facts. And I, you know, before you, John Yours, I think John Yours would have been excellent. He did a spreadsheet on what if Woodlands took only surface water. Let's go down that path. Let's look at the cost accounting. We could increase the output of that plant. And I still have his spreadsheet. And his passing is a very sad thing. But this is time for us to shake this up and break out of the echo chamber of these people that have worked careers in the water industry and bring someone. I watched the trustee meeting. Kent Maggart said, I'd like to see someone from private industry. And he gave an example of one GRP member saying that if you went full throttle on the surface water plant, you drain Lloyd Conroe. Well, engineering wise, that's just ridiculous. That's not true. And so we need someone, I think, like Brad. I feel very passionate about it. And I'd be sad if MUD 47 didn't vote for someone that is one of our peers, someone that's been elected, someone that's out of the echo chamber. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The other advantage to voting for Brad is that it gives Kim more time to get acclimated to her role as a W-2 employee here.
She just started, right?
Well, and then add in the fact that the first thing that popped into my mind is that Brad said that he was retired from ExxonMobil. He has the time on his hands. So you have passion and you have time to really delve into this rather than this is one extra thing on my employee to-do list. And that is that he has the time to be able to devote to it. And going after your passion and you have the time, I'm there with that.
That we nominate or direct our trustee to vote for Brad Hawk in
Second that.
trustee meeting.
Okay.
She's
Can I
second.
make a comment? Just to kind of just to balance things a bit. I think this role is an important part of the deputy's position. I think that from a development perspective, I think from a perspective that whoever's in the deputy GM role, it broadens up the aperture to more of a regional interface with regional, leaders and organizations and people involved in the water business. I think that's ultimately good for us, for the water agency, to have that kind of tenured responsibility and tenured kind of position holding in an area like that. I think it's very important for the deputy role to be growing and developing in that way. If I'm looking at that role, I want something, how do you develop it? We have some succession planning and things that we're trying to grow here and drive. And you got to think about how people develop and grow. And I think that's an important part of that role. And I think Kim would definitely benefit from that. I think Brad's experience comes with a lot of weight to it. Absolutely. And I get the passion on both parts, to be honest with you. I think for us, no matter who is sitting in this position, I would expect us to get, monthly reports. I would have some plans and some performance expectations and some review back to us, so we know exactly what's what's working well, what's not working. Because we also have a role as community voices to help influence the tide of influence out here through our own participation and going to meetings and being part of it. So I think those are all very positive. I'm glad that we see the shift and we feel the shift. And it's great that we have people who are willing to kind of take this on. So,
Kim, could you kind of shadow Brad if Brad gets selected, just for your own development?
Thing that you guys support. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think having water agency representation is important for that organization to see that 128,000 people here care about what's going on, right? And I know you do that, Brad, but it comes with this other view too. So I think those things are like, I like that idea. It's good. Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Or a second. Okay, sorry, I missed that. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes.
We can Brad.
Thank you so much.
Good discussion, everyone. Well done. Receive the attorney's report.
Nothing to discuss in the attorney's report today. You've been quiet for a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have-
Everybody say, well,
No more PFAS
You need to
soups.
stir some things up.
PFAS, that's coming in January.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that's usually your topic.
Okay. Item 15, anything along development at 1488. We have two developments going on, so we always have to distinguish one. Is this
One in the west.
the east or west? This is the,
This was originally put on as, I guess, the east one and no update.
okay. So no matter what, okay,
I don't see a rep here from Howard Hughes. So they're
Okay,
on the
okay.
west side either.
okay. And GM report.
All right, good evening. Just a quick couple updates. Wanted to update that the community work group as part of water renewal of the woodlands has been established and the invite has gone out for that. It's December 2nd. Will be the kickoff meeting for the community work group. And that'll start at 11:30 on the 2nd at the township, just because we don't have a room big enough. So we're utilizing their facility for that. Wanted to update you that I did attend.
Eric, sorry. Can you share what attendance expectations there are for that? Is that just the community work group members? Directors aren't expected to go or participate? Okay.
So, recall offhand which one.
Brad.
It was, yeah. So Brad is your representative. Each MUD will have one, then VA, visual associations, and a few other community members.
Did we decide the PEC is going or not?
Yes,
We decided they are or they decided they're not?
they are invited.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I wanted to update you that I did attend the Texas Water Conservation Association conference a few weeks ago. That was in San Antonio. That was beneficial. Earlier this year, I talked a little bit about the ditch assessment specifically and the need that we needed to build a capital improvement plan, project plan. The overall capital improvement or project plan would include water, sewer, and drainage. As I mentioned before, I think there's a big emphasis that we need to focus on related to the ditches. Condition of the ditches, condition of the ditch piping, are they silted in, you know, those types of things. So the trustees, as part of the budget, had approved some equipment that would facilitate that. And we are actually going to start running the ditches next week to start evaluating. We're going to start with, and then a few weeks ago, the mowing contractor completed the mowing of all 1,000 acres of all the ditches and woodlands. So we're going to start, and then they've started sending in some reports on condition as they've seen it. And so we're going to start running the ditches to assess conditioning of those. We hope to have all of that done and assessed ideally by the end of the year. And then that data will then go into the project plan / CIP, which ultimately will be looked at as part of the budget process next year, mid-year. So that's kind of the plan of attack at this point. So starting that next week.
Do we have any elevation measurement on the ditches, like when they flood? Do we know how high they get other than by looking at them? There's no skate or any kind of measurement.
Well, I mean, it depends.
I know the creeks there are,
Yeah,
but I just didn't know if on the drainage thing.
on the drain.
On the drainage ditches, you know, some of them get really full and they're just about to overflow and then they
Right.
go down.
The hot spot areas, we have, I guess to answer that, we have information on some of the ditches.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, obviously on Bear Panther, there's a lot of data.
Yeah.
That's part of the actual
Yeah.
model. So that was modeled on different rainstorms, tax day, Memorial Day. Yeah, I think Harvey's even in there, where they can identify, you know, based on that storm,
Yeah.
a tax day, for instance, where did the water get, you know, and
Flow and height, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thanks.
so, so that's moving forward. And then I think that's all I had. We'll kick it to John for the communication report.
Okay. I got a question for
Sure.
First comment, it was a good article in Community Impact. I don't know if John had something to do with that. It was good coverage. So nice. And then how did your meeting go with that contractor on Shadow Bend with the 4th grade?
We're gonna defer that to a later date.
Yeah, I did have a real quick question. You know, I was noticing here on page 50, you know, the contractor bored through a line, bored through a line, bored through a line. I saw one, maybe it was last month where a contractor or Comcast did something. Are we charging them back? Are we billing them for those repairs that we do? Okay, I was just curious because it didn't really say in here.
Whether or not we received
Yeah.
their story, but I think Chris reported, I don't know if it was a particular meeting or what it was, that you've had fairly good success in the past.
Lately we have, 3 out of the last 4 at least, so.
Yeah.
We're going well.
Is there any way to hold their feet to the fire if they don't pay?
Right.
So, and that may not be worth.
Not worth it, yeah.
Yep.
That's the risk.
Hey, John.
Good evening. All right, page 54 begins your communications report. There, infrastructure renewal, Eric spoke about the community working group. I did want to point out that we have survey results available for you through the Google Drive. That is the community survey that Holloway conducted. We've got a high-level report there, and if you want to sift through all the responses, there's pages and pages of stuff there, but some pretty interesting comments for sure, and statistics. That's there for you. And then on that water renewal website, you'll see an update, a significant update by the end of the year, we expect, and that will be the inclusion of project cut sheets, they're called. So those are one-pagers on individual projects, describes the project, timelines, funding sources, and so forth. So again, that should be updated by the end of the year. I had a request last month to bring forward some website engagement or traffic statistics, and so that's there at the bottom of 54. In 2023, the PEC enacted a strategic plan for communications, and we've been following since. So that's a nice point there to look at, because pre-PEC strategic plan, we saw website visitation in the previous 5 years coming in around 22,000 page views a month. Right, so that's not visitors. That's one visitor may look at 5 pages, that's 5 pages. Okay. In the almost 24 months since we began, since we implemented strategic plan, we've seen that increase about 75%. And then this year alone, just 2024, well, it's doubled over that historic average. So all of that investment that the MUDs have been putting in communications over the last couple of years, I think is really paying off. This is not the end all determinant of how good we're doing. There's a number of ways we can measure engagement and effectiveness of our communications, but this is an important one because we do really drive folks to the website through our various posts and emails and so forth, collaterals. And so it is, I think, a key gauge for us. So it's good.
It's excellent outcome.
Yeah.
All right. Current market materials follow on the next couple pages. There was that big piece on the front page of community impacts. If you haven't seen that, we'll also be sending out links to the online version through email and weekly and so forth.
I don't think it's possible for anybody in the Woodlands to have not seen that yet.
I mean, it goes to every household, so that's a
Yeah.
big piece. That's an important piece, yeah.
On the emails, it's in the magazine, it was everywhere.
Nice job. I think it came across pretty well. There's a key point, it was at the very bottom. Would have been great if it was right up front, but it did make it in there, which is, we are doing renewal. We've been doing renewal. We've been doing a lot and shining a light on the fact that we haven't raised rates to accomplish that. So that's a point that we want to continue to get out in the forefront here, is shining a light on what you're already doing.
So John, in that article, there was a reference to $106 million of capital improvements. And that number didn't resonate with me. I was trying to say, where does that come from? I got asked on last night by some of my pickleball guys who said, hey, we're all on Mud 47, right? Like, what are we spending $106 million on? So I didn't have a good answer on what, I think I read it in that article, right?
Yeah.
I just arm us with what makes up that number,
I could get that to you.
right? To get to the directors, because I think it's a natural question. And that's just the beginning, right? I couldn't just answer, well, that's this, and this. It's,
Let me go back and
you know
pull
what I
that.
mean? I'd like to be able to rattle off like the top 3 or 4 items, and that would make up more than half of it. I could probably eventually get there, but it would look like I knew what I was talking about.
Let me get that to you.
Some well-informed pickleball players.
They try, they make me work, that's why.
I'll distract you.
That's awesome.
All right, just a couple of things here. You got samples of the current water bill, which is on renewal, water bill ad, excuse me. And then the upcoming one is a dual message on shutting down your sprinklers, right? Save some water, save some money, do your lawn a favor. And then also the fact that winter sewer averaging kicks in December 1, that runs through the end of February. Right, so we really want to get that message out to folks. Try every winter to let them know that they're saving water this winter. It's a win-win-win, right? They're saving money now. They're doing most of that water that they're saving is from not watering their lawns anymore, so they're healthier for their lawn. And then they're capping their sewer charge for the next 12 months.
And they only have to shower once a week.
And shower less, yeah, that's right. Whatever it takes. And then finally, we've got a couple of outreach events coming up. We'll be at the Sterling Ridge VA Festival on December 8th. And then we're going to start a periodic appearance at the Rogansville Farmers Market. Looking to be out there at least once a month. Indefinitely. So, any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, that wraps up the trustee piece. Don't think we need to go to closed session, right? Okay, that's 18. We're back from closed session. We didn't have it. No more comments still. Any items for future agenda that we have that we want to hear about? Nothing right now. Okay, then
Maybe after the next meeting.
December 17th.
then 1:47 meeting is adjourned.
Yeah.
We-